All right, thanks everyone for joining us again. Our next speaker is Leggett. She is a parent and parent of a child with a learning difference, and chair of the Montgomery County Transition Work Group. She also failed at retiring, like many of us, retired after a full career and is now helping as an advocate. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you very much. It's been a long time since my child has been a child. She's almost 40, but she lives here in Rockville, lives very independently, and I'm going to talk a little bit about her and about our lives together, in which we have indeed found a lot of joy. She is a young adult daughter with neurological differences. If she were on the stage with me, you would have no idea that she has any issues. She has a gorgeous smile, an infectious laugh, and an unbridled enthusiasm about the things she loves, especially tennis and theater. She's a great volunteer at events just like this. She can put out all of the things, she can greet people. She's a wonderful help. She's wonderful at doing all of those kinds of things, and now she even speaks at events like this. But her everyday challenges have really not changed. Telling time, scheduling, counting money, executive functioning skills, but sort of off the charts. Counting money largely went away with credit cards, although the other day she had to use cash, and that proved to be quite a challenge. And telling time and scheduling are still barriers. If you ask her to meet you in your office at 10:45, she will have no idea what time that is. If you say 11:15, she wouldn't understand. At 10:45, she can read that on her digital watch, but she would have no idea how long it would take her to get there from her home or even her office on a different floor. So figuring those calculations, scheduling, knowing if you've got something at 10, can I put something at 11? It's a different time, but how long do I need to get there? All of those functioning things that you need to function every day. Sometimes her questions are a little more penetrating and even funny. She works part-time for the Montgomery County Department of Aging and Disability, which is appropriate. She has an outstanding supervisor who has really tried to stretch her over the years and has her filling in numbers on a spreadsheet, and she had to identify fiscal year. She had to know when to put things in the 2023 fiscal year, and some things now in 2023, she had to put in a 2024 fiscal year. And it was impossible for her to figure that out. And I was trying to explain fiscal years to her. And she said, how do you know so much about fiscal years? You never worked for Montgomery County. And I said, well, everybody has a fiscal year. And I was trying to explain the rationale. I don't think she got it, but she has figured out where to put the things on the spreadsheet. So she has been helped with that. In school in the 1990s, she was always other health impaired, OHI, because we never had a real diagnosis. Didn't have learning disabilities. She had a little bit of ADHD. As a toddler, she had delays in reading, eye-hand coordination, some ADHD behavior, challenges with expressive and comprehensive language, but her abilities always outpaced her IQ scores. So we were always finding that she could do other things, just not what the IQ scores tested. So it was important to remember that and really work to her strengths. We learned a few things in that journey that I think are worth sharing. And I would add that through this whole time of raising my daughter and her older brother, my husband and I were both working very full-time demanding jobs, and there was no virtual work at that time. So we were mixing it in with everyone's. I think we all recognize that we're all doing all of these things in the midst of very busy schedules, and we have to figure out how to make it all work. The first thing I want to share is that she had an IEP, an individual education plan, as many of our kids do, since she was 2, but we have never depended on it. She attended Montgomery County Public Schools and for a while the public schools in Atlanta and the graduate transition program at Montgomery College. I depended much more on building individual relationships with teachers than whatever was printed in her IEP. And the best teachers were often not the special education teachers. They were regular teachers who loved their subject and were so eager to share that subject matter with their students that they were willing to work with me and figure out any way we could to make it happen for my daughter. Sometimes we suggested projects with which I helped that the whole class did. Other times we had teachers that said, no, we don't have time for that. And we did our own project. In a social studies class, at one point, Nadia and I were one of the first pairs of people. She was one of the first students to participate in the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress, in which young people, not just young people, anybody can interview a veteran of any war and do that on a video recording. Now it would be really easy. You do it on Zoom. This was before we had, at least we had computers, but we didn't have Zoom. And we interviewed a very close friend who was a neighbor. Nadia knew him very well, and he was a veteran of World War II. And she developed all the questions. She asked the questions. We videotaped it. It was a marvelous conversation. It was wonderful both ways. I'm not sure who got more out of it. Arch had never told anyone all of the stories of his wartime years and loved the fact that somebody was interested. Nadia was very interested. And there were all of these smiles and interaction. Well, that tape is still on file at the Library of Congress. And she understands World War II in a way she would never get from a chapter in a book. Later, she had a couple of outstanding English teachers. And in one case, they read Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. And that was a tough sell for Nadia. But she made a quilt. She had learned to sew and do a lot of fine stitching. And she knew the scenes that she wanted, and I did a little of the drawing, but she did all the sewing for the scenes in a small quilt, showing the scenes of Their Eyes Were Watching God. And to this day, she remembers and continues to read Zora Neale Hurston because she had the pleasure of making that quilt and making that book something she could remember, and it was not just a bunch of multiple choice questions. The other thing I've done, I was always involved in the school in other ways than just working with my child. Usually it ended up being the special needs chair for the PTA because that position was never filled. But it was any way that I got involved in the school. And I think that's really important. If you, in the back of your mind, a parent may be thinking, I can't possibly find time for that. Find a friend, do something with a friend. One of my closest friends to this day is a woman I met at the copy machine in Atlanta 20 years ago. And you can, if you do it together, there's always somebody to share it with. And then you've let the school and the teachers know that you don't care just about your kid. You're really interested in doing something for the whole school. And I think that's incredibly important to getting those teachers to work with you and get them beyond trying to plug your child into some category where they don't really fit, but get them to work with you on processes that will help everyone. The other thing is to look for skills and activities that your child enjoys. And we've talked a lot about this, and the film we're going to see will really highlight that. And sometimes it can be difficult, and sometimes you have to keep trying stuff. We tried camping way too long before it was very clear that Nadia had absolutely no interest in going out cooking over a fire. And we travel, and her father is the same way. His idea of camping is a Holiday Inn. So we don't try camping anymore. And it took us a while, and we had to try a lot of things. We tried childcare, didn't like that, didn't like the noise of young children, so that wasn't going to work. So you have to keep trying things. And Brendan sailing, I think, is a perfect example of trying something. And sailing is something that parents might not normally think of unless they happen to be water people. Mm-hmm. So it's even more important to show that to young people as a possibility. Here's something totally different. You never thought of it. We tried kayaking. Nadia and I tried kayaking. Usually when we were traveling, we don't have kayaks and we don't do much of it here, but we did it while we were traveling. And interestingly, we came home, and just a few weeks ago, we tried the adaptive paddling program that's newly offered by Montgomery Parks. And they do it with, what's the name of the organization? Team River Runner, which is an organization that teaches disabled veterans with disabilities how to kayak. And very successfully, and they were participating with Montgomery Parks in this adaptive paddling. Well, Lottie didn't need, they had kayaks with fins at the back to keep them steady. And they had a special ramp so that you could get on the kayak. And a lot of the ways that you may make a sailboat adaptable as well. Well, Lottie didn't need that kind of adaptation, but we had always kayaked in a double kayak, and she was behind me. And I wanted her to have the confidence to be in front alone in her kayak. She had an instructor who was a woman my age with 2 prosthetic legs. And it took her a while to get into her kayak, but once she did, you had no clue that she had no legs. And her only problem was that we were on Seneca Creek, which is totally flat, and she wanted some rapids. And it was another reminder for me, we can't assume. I saw her walking in, sitting down in the group, and of course I assumed that she was going to be one of the students who'd come for the adaptive paddling. And then she turned out to be an outstanding instructor, and by the end, my daughter never wants to get in a double kayak again. She's delighted to be in a kayak on her own, and that, I don't know how often we'll kayak, but it gave her a tremendous amount of confidence that she could learn to do that, learn to do something on her own that she hadn't. And I think it's really important to find those activities. The other one is theater for her. It started with an outstanding Shakespeare teacher in high school. Who'd have thought that a kid with difficulties in learning comprehension would enjoy Shakespeare? But she did. She acted out some of the performances. We went to a performance as a field trip to Shakespeare Theater, and it's been 20 years now, and we have either ushered or subscribed to Shakespeare Theater ever since. And it's stretched both of us. We had to do it together, and interesting, they always wanted us as ushers, because if any of you go to the theater, you know that most of the ushers are my age and well older. Nobody ushers when they're 30 years old or 25 years old. So they love having a young usher. But we always insisted on ushering together. And that was so that she could not find the seats. She couldn't find those numbers on the seats and count all those seats. But I could do that, and she could hand out the programs. So we were a great pair, and we just made sure that they knew that we had to be, wherever they put us in the theater, we had to be put together. But it worked very well, and we're off to see Evita this week. We aren't ushering quite so much, but we're seeing programs, and she finds shows when we travel and here. She's the one who often finds the shows that she wants to see. She also participated in the experiential educational internship at the Kennedy Center. And I say this both because it was key to her development, but also for any of you who are developing internships. This one was especially well done. It really began with the notion of assuming that the young adults with intellectual differences and disabilities were capable young people. So they were included in the regular internship program. They had to attend all the seminars. They were expected to attend multiple performances and do a little review of the performances, write up a little review. They had a mentor from GW, a special education mentor who helped them, but the expectations were high. And at the start of the year, we picked 2 or 3 performances, and the person who ran the program says, no, you need to have about 1 every month. Well, we had a stack, Nadia still remembers this. We had a stack of Kennedy Center tickets, certainly bigger than any stack I've ever had since then. And there were 2 tickets for each one. And she took a friend or a family member, a different friend or a family member each time, to music performances, opera, everything the Kennedy Center offers. Nadia saw one of them, and she was the person directing everything. She knew where to park. She knew where the theaters were. She knew which was the Hall of Nations and which was the Hall of States. She knew where the gift shop was. She knew how many floors up the tickets were. And now, even today, the Kennedy Center is a special place for her. And that gave her something that was special, that she knew something about, that was not a weird thing. It was a thing that everybody in the Washington area knows about. And it's sort of very cocktail party conversation. Whenever she needs something to talk about, she can always talk about her time at the Kennedy Center. They did an excellent job. Unfortunately, the program's been on hiatus for a while, and it's too bad because it was one of their outstanding offerings. And then as an adult, it's important to find things that you enjoy doing together. Most likely your young person is going to be living in the same area with you, not necessarily, but very likely. And you're probably going to keep on having involvement with them in some way. And you don't want it to constantly feel like a burden and a drain, always on you as the parent. So you got to find something that you enjoy. Theater works that way. Tennis, she plays tennis. I watch tennis. We were at the US Open last weekend, and she's the one who knows everything. She knows not just who the players are and the flags of their countries. She recognizes their coach and their assistant coach and their therapist and their mother and their father and their husband. We're walking through and says, oh, there's Carolyn Wozniacki's husband. And I'm very nice. And she knows all these people and loves being there, but it's fun for me as a parent being there with her. When we travel, we do the same thing. We enjoy going out to dinner and traveling, and she will often find the places for us to visit. So it's really important to find something, even while your young person is in a child or in high school or as an adult, to find something you enjoy together so that you're not together just to go to doctor's appointments or pay the rent or all the dumb stuff that we all have to do. There's another fellow in Montgomery County that some of you may know, John Bogaski. He and his wife, Shelley, run Special Olympics in Montgomery County. And they coach and do all the things you would do for Special Olympics. But John, who's a retired attorney, who's also not retired, does a weekly newsletter of all the things that he and his son have done or are going to do this weekend. And part of it is to let everybody know of all kinds of events and things that they could do. But it's also very evident that John is having as much fun doing all these activities, golfing and concerts and dances and dinners and absolutely everything. But it's obvious that John is enjoying these things as much as his son. And that's important. You can't go through your whole adult life resenting the fact that you have a child who needs more attention and keeps on needing more attention. And that's, I find, that the best way to do that. Well, my work with Nadia led to my participation in the Transition Work Group, which is a funny named organization created by Joan Karasik in the 1980s. Some of you may be familiar with her name. She's sort of a legend in special education in Montgomery County. And the group focuses on kids with IDD, intellectual and developmental disabilities, and autism, from high school to whatever comes next. Now, the government says transition is age 14 to 26. We have discovered, and anyone with a child over 26, you know that the transitions don't suddenly end at 26. They move to new jobs, they move to new apartments, whatever. So our group focuses on whatever comes next for as long as it comes. And now we have a lot of young people who are no longer young people. We're going to have an aging population of people with Down syndrome. We've never had that before because they haven't traditionally lived long enough. And now they are. And that's exciting, but now we have to be prepared to help them be as independent as they can be for as long as they are around. Joan reminds me frequently how far we've come. And I think we have a tendency, and particularly in these conversations where we've talked about how much more we need teachers to understand, to accept that learning differences are differences that everyone has, and we certainly want teachers to understand that. But Joan reminded me in a conversation how far we've come. Her son with IDD is in his 60s now, and I once asked her what was the greatest progress she made since she began advocating, and she said special education. And I said, yeah, what about special education? And she said, no, special education. Because there was no special education. You may not like that term, but thank God it exists. And it didn't when she began advocating back in the 1950s. There were no resources, there were no IEPs, she advocated for all of that. She started the Karasik preschool in Montgomery County as part of the arc of Montgomery County. And a lot of the advances in education are due to the advocacy of Joan Harrison. She continued, she died 2 years ago at age 103. And she was still coming to our transition work group meetings at age 100 and making comments.
Wow.
Now, I don't intend to go on that long. God willing, it was nice that she was around that long, but she started the organization, and it started as a little group with 6 people around a table. And now it has grown to, and at some point in there, she asked if I would take it over, and it seemed like a nice little task because it was a friendly little group. We met once a month and had coffee and talked about issues and advocated. Well, now it's a coalition of about 50 organizations, state agencies, local government agencies, the schools, the library, all the service providers, all the agencies, the Jubilee, the Sunflower, Main Street, all the organizations that serve people with IDD and autism. We have a very well-attended monthly meeting. We also have 2 resource fairs each year. One is coming up right away, and you have a flyer at your table. It'll be November 5th. This is a slightly smaller fair. It's going to be held at CLE, which is its own very interesting organization, College Living Experience. They offer college support at Montgomery College. And they also offer housing support. They're right in Rockville, just off Hungerford Drive. And we'll have about 50 vendors there. Again, it'll be state agencies, service providers, providing information on, it's not a job fair, but you can find out, talk to organizations that help young people find jobs, a lot of social opportunities, recreational opportunities, education programs, all the state agencies, that's a big thing. Everybody always wants to talk to somebody from DDA, the Developmental Disabilities Administration. We have somebody there. There's always a long line to speak with her, but you get to speak face to face with the outstanding young woman who is our Southern Maryland head. So that's coming up. There's another, we have a big fair in the spring. It's April 7th, 2024, and that's at Montgomery College. And we have more, that's open to more vendors. These are always well attended. There are 250 to 300 people coming to each of these fairs, and we've been going on now for about 10 or 11 years. And the joy for me is to have a parent say, I met someone at that fair and that changed my life. You never know. Could be one person each year, could be 10 people. Sometimes it's a little change. Sometimes it's a parent group, a resource group that works. Sometimes it's a social event. The other joy is that more and more of our vendors have clients, the young person with the self-advocate staffing their tables. So they're getting out there, they're speaking up, they're talking about what they're getting out of this organization. And that's marvelous as well. And my daughter's almost at the registration table. She knows that day is, she's got to work that day, whatever it is. One of the other things we do is create some very simple brochures, and you've got copies of them at your table. One is called Are You Ready? It's just a checklist for people heading to transition. Have you done all these things by this age? And a short list of contacts and resources. These are made for people in Montgomery County. They're applicable throughout Maryland. The kinds of questions would be applicable outside Maryland, but the contacts are obviously from Maryland. Another one is jobs. And it's sort of questions and resources for how to get a job, why to get a job, and again, some of the resources and tips for parents and tips for the self-advocate. And that leads me to the most recent brochure we made, which is Letting Go, Easier Said Than Done, Conversations for Parents. And this came about in an interesting way. One of our fairs, we offered one-on-one resume counseling. You could come and spend 15 minutes, show them your resume and get some tips on how to make it better. And actually, Brennan board member Molly Matthews was one of our coaches for that resume session. Well, we didn't have very many sign up, and almost to a person, the people who signed up were parents who came without their kid. to a resume session about their kid. So, you know, you're not going to be in that interview. You can't go to the interview where your son or daughter is going to be employed. And they would also come with these books instead of a one-page resume. Because I think they felt, since their child had some disabilities, they had to really go to great lengths to explain that their child really had all these skills. So we said, okay, let's step back from resumes. We need to get parents to realize that they've got to move their child toward independence. That doesn't mean full independence. It's not the same kind of independence for all children. Again, just as the learning differences are different for each child, so is independence. But the topics that we covered in the little brochure are risk-taking, flexibility and resilience, making choices, and helping, not doing. And that was key. And we update these every couple of years. So if you, I've got cards. If you see anything you think should be added to any of these, please let me know, because 2024 is our update year. Joy is also in networking, and that's another thing that the transition work group has come to do very well. I'll get a question from somebody. I have a student who needs help getting to a Montgomery County school but lives in Howard County. I have somebody who needs free internet and a free cell phone. What can I do? I've got a child who needs testing in Farsi. All sorts of questions. And I send this out to the Transition Work Group Network, which is about 140 people on an email. And almost within minutes, we get answers. And the answers go directly to the people who are seeking. And the people who have sent in those questions have said, you know, this is great. I'm finding answers, because obviously all our brains are much better than one brain, and somebody else has probably had that problem. So working together has been really a joy and a useful part of that. We have a very active Facebook page. A lot of our self-advocates are active on Facebook rather than a lot of the other social media. So it's a very comfortable place for them. So that's a very active place. There are also 2 listservs that are very active in Montgomery County, MC Transitions and MC Needs. MC Needs is for younger children, MC Transitions for older ones. And here again, it's finding out events and speakers like the one that Kate talked about coming up. That's the kind of thing that could be on this listserv. But also parents saying, can you recommend a psychologist? Can you recommend, my son wants a date. How can I get him a date? My son, we have lots of social questions. Yeah. But again, it's a lot of personal questions, and then the conversation can continue privately, but the initial question comes out. And again, it's a marvelous way. I think part of what didn't exist before that exists much more now are support groups, both for parents and also for our young people, where they can sit and say and realize that you're not alone, and you might be able to find some ideas. And I think that is realizing that you're not alone is huge. I want to say that I am planning a class for politics and prose in January called Life Through a Different Lens. And we're going to be exploring, it's all going to be books by people with disabilities, a wide range of disabilities. Sometimes the book is about people living with a disability. Sometimes the book is about totally other subjects, but they happen to have some sort of disability. I expect to be including Normal Sucks, which is probably a book many of you are familiar with, or at least Jonathan Mooney, the author, who wrote The Short Bus. I expect to have him on the program. We also have people who are blind, deaf-blind. There's a deaf-blind woman who graduated from Harvard and wrote an excellent book about it. Down syndrome, and several invisible disabilities. I don't have dates for that yet, but you can check the politics and prose, and we expect it to be in January. One guest for that program will be a friend who uses a wheelchair because she has MS. She has been very bothered by the stigma that she feels is against her, that people see her with a big C on her chest for can't. And she hates that. And she really is out to change the mindset so that C is can and competent. And you can find the competence. And when you find the competence for your young person, your family member, your student, then you'll find the joy. Thank you very much.
Any questions for you?
Two quick questions.
Yeah.
One, could you reiterate the name of the book event? Just writing it down.
It's Politics and Prose. And it will be called Life Through a Different Lens. Not up there yet, because they haven't posted classes for January yet, but that's what it'll be, and we'll be looking for.
Amazing. And then for the second question, it's also very quick. Is there anywhere that we need to register for the biannual events you mentioned?
No, those fairs are open to the public and free, so you can just show up.
Thank you.
Yes,
What was the MC needs? You said that was that website or something that people.
MC Transitions.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, that's, it's MC Transitions at groups.io.
Okay.
And I think if you Google that, you'll get to that place, and then you can sign up. And it's MC Needs at groups.io. Yes.
Thank you for sharing all of that. How are there, I mean, this is obviously a group that's been around and been doing a lot. Do you have peer groups around the state or the region? And selfishly, I'm interested because we live in a different county, but also just wondering if transition leadership groups like this are starting to network more and share. And
I don't know. We sort of, we have a few people, most of the people are representatives of their agency. So they're professionals in the field. A few of us are parents. And a lot of the professionals are people who are parents who became professionals. And several of them have said that they don't really know of anything quite like this because it mixes so many different groups. We've got parents, we've got state agencies, we've got state and local government agencies, service providers. And there are, so no, I don't think there are many that are specific. There are groups of providers. There's a brand new Maryland Council of Support Brokers. So all those people who are going to help people who've chosen self-direction if they're working with the Developmental Disabilities Administration. But there's nothing that sort of has everybody under one umbrella, including the school system. So we really have people representing who are pretty committed to the organization, but you don't network in other states. There is something similar. There was something similar in Howard County, but I don't know how active it is. As I say, there are organizations that include all the providers, but then they often don't include the parents. So there aren't very many that cover as much ground as Joan Karras set up. So, yes.
Really, it's a comment, but I just really loved and appreciated what you said about relationships, because I think that is something that isn't talked about enough in schools in general. Like you are, as a teacher, yes, you're imparting content knowledge, but you're building relationships, or you should be. And so that really struck me with what you said, and because that's what we are so much about at the Odyssey School. In fact, we have a really interesting closing ceremony where our students actually get up and talk about their own journeys. It takes a lot of confidence, right, to get up there, and they do that in front of all the parents and all that at graduation, and it's really special. But what really hits us every year is them talking about what relationship with this teacher, whoever it was, or a coach, somebody at the school that they really connected with. And so I just appreciated that, because it is something I think that we have to keep in mind in a world that is supposedly so connected with technology, that it is this human connection that is really has the mileage.
That's right. And those connections and relationships are lasting.
Yes,
My daughter and I are having lunch next week with her preschool teacher.
that's lovely.
And that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
But those have been very, very meaningful relationships. Important to do. And the graduate transition program does the same thing. They have every graduate, and these are basically 2 years after they've left public schools. Every graduate speaks, and these are young people who have Down syndrome and fairly significant challenges.
Yeah.
And they all get up there in their cap and gown.
What a great way though for others to see if there's
Exactly.
more of that though, to keep dispelling the myths
That's
and
right.
normalize.
That's right.
All right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.